it going to be all about efficiency and not about new toys at this Paris Airshow then?
Well, it does appear as if the major manufacturers are playing down that there won't be the 1,700 orders that there were 2 years ago at Paris. So they need to have some news to tell everybody, and of course that relates to, can you save weight, can you get more passengers in aircraft? I'm sure we'll all be pleased to hear about that. It is that drive to efficiency which seems to be taking the headlines.
And it's not a sideshow, though, is it? As Michael O'Leary was saying just recently, getting a few more seats in an aircraft can really change the economics on which aircraft you're going to go for, or just how quickly it pays for itself in terms of the economics and how it all works. So it's not a peripheral subject, is it? No,
but of course aircraft economics are quite difficult. Will you really fill every seat up? Perhaps the low-cost carriers, the Ryanairs, EasyJets, their drive is to operate at very high load factors. Typically, though, the average load factor is probably about 75, 76%. So you're not really using all of those seats. So, but combined with, can you get more seats on? Can that mean that you can offer different pricing structures? It becomes a complex issue.
It does, and it depends a lot on the assumptions you make, I guess, and when you're modelling all of this stuff. What about, so we're probably not going to get any new aircraft, is that the message that you're hearing about Paris? I mean, when I was at Farnborough last year, it was all about the Neos. It was all about taking an older aircraft, re-engineering it with new engines, and trying to get clients excited, customers excited about that. Will we hear more about the Neos instead of new aircraft?
Well, the Neo, A320 Neo comes into operation later this year. So they will be on display, but that's a long process, 5 or 6 years of development. There may be some discussion about the A380 and whether that will go down a Neo route itself. Emirates have been requesting that, but it may be a bit premature. I think we'll see the A350. 2 years ago it had just launched or had its test flight. That will be on display. So it's really a bit of consolidation this year, I think, rather than perhaps masses of orders. So,
what kind of reception will some of the Middle Eastern carriers get? We've just had this really rather noisy IATA Air Travel Association conference over in the US, haven't we? A lot of noise being made by the likes of Qatar Airways, and they're going to have a big presence in Paris, I understand, with lots of aircraft on the ground. At the same time, some of the older carriers, more legacy carriers, are increasingly agitated about the extent of state support that some of the Middle Eastern carriers get through lower tax rates, for example.
Yeah, that is a huge issue. One of my colleagues said, "Oh, are you going to the Qatar Airshow next week?" because they have 5 aircraft on display. But I think that will be largely ignored at the Paris Airshow. This is about the manufacturers, but there is a lot of concern. The Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, looking at some protectionist measures to prevent more aircraft from Middle East carriers landing in Schiphol, Frankfurt, Paris, etc. It has been complicated. IAG, of course, BA and Iberia's owner, is falling out with its European friends because it's really saying, well, let's just open the skies. It's good for everybody.
We have to remember who owns their shares, don't we?
Yeah, 10% owned by Qatar, of course. So I think that will be a sideshow next week anyway in Paris.
An interesting web is weaved. What about who's going to be doing the buying? You said, so it's not going to be a year of massive orders, perhaps. But one of the other features of last year's show, which of course was in Farnborough, was the extent to which leasing companies were doing a lot of the buying. Is that going to be, an ongoing trend in aviation, that it's the leasing companies who increasingly own the fleets?
Yeah, we're at a stage now where it's probably just less than 50% of aircraft being delivered go onto an operating lease structure. The view is that will increase much over the next 20 years with so many aircraft coming onto the scene. Another 20,000 commercial jets being delivered in the next 20 years. One of the options to finance those as an airline is to go down an operating lease route, and it's a very popular way of doing it. So leasing companies will be ordering aeroplanes.